Today, we got somebody on the show who's going to talk about something we've never talked about before: how to get started with creating SOPs and systems for your e-commerce business. He's helped over 100 businesses crush in this regard, and his presentation at the Sell and Scale Summit on this topic was one of the favorites of the whole event. How cool is that? Pretty cool, I think. Do you want to see how your listing or maybe competitor's listing rates as to best practices for listing optimization? Or maybe you want to compare a group of ASINs or Amazon products to see how they compare to each other. Maybe you want to see within seconds the top keywords for a single listing or a group of listings. You can do that and more with the Helium 10 tool Listing Analyzer. For more information, go to h10.me/listing analyzer. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Serious Sellers Podcast by Helium 10. I am your host, Bradley Sutton, and this is the show that's a completely BS-free, unscripted, and unrehearsed organic conversation about serious strategies for serious sellers of any level in the e-commerce world. We've got a serious seller here from another part of the world. Where exactly are you right now?
So despite my accent being Australian, I'm sat in Israel, in Tel Aviv.
Excellent. Now, why don't you just go ahead, and this is the first time you've ever been on the show. Why don't you just give us your 30-second elevator pitch or your introduction here so people can be introduced to you?
My name's Yoni, but I am Australian. I spent a good decade or so in creative advertising and digital marketing strategy, working with the likes of Sony, MasterCard, Mercedes-Benz, Medtronic, back when there wasn't even social media for brands. So I launched Mercedes-Benz, Australia, New Zealand's Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. I was the largest Facebook media buyer for a couple of years there, actually, for Mercedes-Benz. And it was pretty cool having Mercedes-Benz and Facebook fight over which tent you sat in for the Grand Prix each year. So I'm not going to lie, I definitely have aspects that I miss from living that life. I moved to LA, and there I was working with Sony and Snapchat and Medtronic, and everything from web design to development, content production, TV commercials, live activations. I mean, the whole works. And before, there was all the talk of off Amazon traffic when it was just brand building and e-commerce before, marketplaces really had that level of disruption. That was sort of the time that I was growing up in the space. And about 5 years ago when I moved here, I met a couple of guys who had an Amazon store that had got stuck at about 2 million. I came in and in about 12 months was able to take that from 2 to 5 million. Thras ultimately acquired that business. And on the back of that, I realized we could help a lot of sellers go through the challenges that, I'd personally faced, but mostly from the agency side. So I got 3 companies, Bradley, that I'm the co-founder in. So Multiply Me is executive search and HR into the Philippines of high-level talent. So you never hear me talk about VAs because that's not what it is. I have a company called Escala, and when I was chatting at the Sell and Scale Summit, which was incredible, might I add, that was all through Escala. So that's our process improvement management consultancy, and that's all about building high-level systems for serious e-commerce sellers. And the last business is called South Cole, and we've just stood up a $50 million fund to invest in e-commerce businesses to grow them to exit over a 2-year period with a couple of JV partners. So I got my hands in a few pies, but everything that I do is in servitude to helping e-commerce sellers really get the most out of their life. And, I got to say, I locked in a little humble brag here, locked in that early bird or early days H10 deal. So I'm still rolling that one up just to give you a bit of context into how valuable Helium 10 was in my personal journey. And, it's kind of full circle for me sitting here on the podcast, being able to share a little bit, hopefully with people, with the support that Helium 10 has given me from a keyword research to listing creation and I could sit here and spend a whole episode talking about all the different functions and features and values that H10 can add. But anyway, there's my saving you with your bag situation.
There we go. Yeah. What was your first main job? Like did you immediately go into, the marketing and advertising things, or did you, what did you do after university?
Yeah. So my first real job, while I was still at university, was headhunting. So I was in recruitment, headhunting specifically, again, before LinkedIn was what it was today. And there was ways you could game even LinkedIn back then. But about 6 months in, I realized, it just wasn't for me. And I sat in this incubator and I ended up leaving an opportunity to take a $40,000 commission if I just stayed in for 3 months. And back in 2008 or whenever it was, it's still a lot of money today, but it was a lot more money back then, especially when you're in your early 20s. And I went and took on a job at this creative agency or this digital marketing agency, unpaid. I was passionate about the space of digital and e-commerce.
I actually, I'm wearing a Sell and Scale Summit, t-shirt. You referenced it here, and unfortunately, I didn't get to see your presentation, nor did I even see the like your slides. Almost all the speakers, I was able to at least see the slides, beforehand or after, that I missed, but I couldn't find yours anywhere. However, from many people, your presentation was one of the favorites of the conference for them. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I want to find out a little bit about what you talked about. I believe it was kind of like, setting up SOPs, if I'm not mistaken, and systems. And actually, it's something that as Amazon or e-commerce or Walmart seller sometimes is not the top of mind of people. However, I found that the higher level you go as far as the seller, it's one of the more common questions. It's like, my title is not just podcast host at Helium 10, it's director of training. And because of that, I have to decide what, some of our speakers that we have for our training systems and we have the Freedom Ticket course. And so I'm always constantly talking to sellers and saying, what do you guys need? Where's a pain point that maybe I can't help you personally. If it's Helium 10, I can definitely help you with that. But, maybe if I can't help you with it, I need to go find somebody, maybe to bring in somebody for training or for presentation. And one of the common ones I've seen in the last couple of years is definitely man, our SOPs suck and things like that. So, how did you start that part? I know you do, a lot of things, but how did you become kind of an expert in that? Was there a need, were people asking you for this as well? Or was this just something that you're like, hey, I just know that this is an issue out there that needs to be, that people need help with?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd spent a long time working for and growing agencies, and I always had the vantage point where I was in a small business. So I was the 15th employee, we grew to about 30. I was the 20th employee, we grew to about 40 when I was living in Los Angeles. And what I realized was, while it was absolutely painstaking working with, let's say, a Medtronic, where when we would produce content for them, we'd have to have 2 months of approvals given because of how arduous it was to get through all these medical boards and regulations. And so I saw the need and I saw all the mistakes and the evolutions of growing up in agency land. And when you think about the DNA of an e-commerce business, it's all the same functions. It's creative, it's content production, it's listing optimization, it's every aspect, every person that you're going to deal with, from video to copy to image creation. You're dealing with all the same people, essentially. So I had that experience, and about 6 months into launching Multiply Me, I actually interviewed this woman. Her name's Josephine Ping, and she was a management consultant, had come from Ernst & Young, and just really wanted to work at a startup. And I was like, listen, she applied to be a project manager inside of our marketing team. And I said, it would be the biggest fallacy to have you just focused in on project management inside of a marketing team. Let's see what you can do. So she delivered the first internal project of systemizing our business based on Ernst & Young's EY's methodology. And I quickly realized that, this was revolutionary for us. Even though both my co-founder and I are very systems orientated, we'd never been at management consulting level, especially not the likes of EY. So what ended up happening is, on the back of that, we pulled a ready-built team out of EY, and we really focused our attention on the areas we knew best, and that's how to apply this to e-commerce. And so that was where Escala was born, and we're a little over 2 years old right now, and we have close to 40 management consultants full-time on staff.
Obviously different size companies has different needs, for this kind of thing. But at what point should me as an entrepreneur, as an Amazon seller, as a Walmart seller, start thinking hey, I better set some SOPs and some systems in place? Is this something from day one, even if I'm a one man or one woman show? Like, is there at least some level of organization that I should be thinking of from the day that I start my Amazon Seller Central account? Or is this something that just becomes exponentially more important only when I make my first hire? Or talk to me about, we have listeners of all levels. So who should be listening right now?
Yeah, so I'd say it appeals to everyone, but on the caveat that it's at different levels, and you're sort of spot on in your line of questioning here. So my advice always wouldn't be build the process from day one. Just start writing and documenting all your processes and build it how we do in your high level process and your sub processes and the subgroups and going through all the way to working instructions. Because in reality, we're all trying to figure it out when we're starting to formulate our business ideas, whatever it turns into, right? It might be a three, I was going to say three figure. It might be, just launching one product, maybe rethink your choices here. But ultimately, if you're just launching your first product, and I would say maybe a better way of looking at it is, what does it actually solve? So what do SOPs, standard operating procedures, solve for? So if you're just starting out, if you were to walk away from the business and there was no information that existed on how to operate it, and you wanted to go on holiday, for example, having standard operating procedures in place makes sense. Now, as you scale your business, the question I would ask any listener to this podcast at any level, or especially once they have, 3, 5, 15, 30 SKUs in market, is what is stopping you from giving the same level of attention to your top hero or top 3 hero products that you would be giving to the remaining 27 if you had a set of 30? What would that unlock for you? Or you as the visionary in the business, you as the one who came up with the brand, with the products and they're selling, how valuable is your time in the business to be thinking about things like product development, or getting a trade patent, or something that's really going to add value, or finding that next manufacturer that's going to reduce the time or the cost attached to it? Or what's stopping you from accelerating your product development? Why can't you bring 15 products to market a year and not 3? What are all the time constraints, resource constraints? Are you, as the founder or as the key person, are you making all the decisions? Are you the bottleneck really stopping you from setting yourself free? So, I think like the logic or where you start to think, when should I implement standard operating procedures, really comes to, have I figured out where my business is and what I need to deliver? And can I delegate, can I have someone else do something that's about 80% as to what I can, and therefore I should delegate? And that's when you should start to really think about bringing SOPs into the fold.
Let's keep going, talking about what we don't have time to just word for word go over your entire presentation, but what are some of the tips and tricks that you're giving people that wowed them so much that they all told me that they loved your presentation so much? So let's dive into the highlights from it.
The way we at Escala look at systems or SOPs, it's about building systems, not standard operating procedures. They're a component of. So systems are the perfect harmony between people, process, and technology coming together to actually deliver on everything that needs to happen inside of the business. So a lot of Amazon sellers will focus on the technology. They'll say, well, click here to download Helium 10's keyword search term report, and off they go. They think that's the SOP. And while Helium 10 is a great platform, that is not a full circle delivery. If I change just a couple of elements, so if I simply stated every Monday the data analyst downloads the search term report from Helium 10, then what I've done there is I've connected the time, so the process, the person, the analyst, and the piece of technology in Helium 10. And so all of a sudden, and I'm giving you the most simplistic of ways, but I can't really go any further without helping people understand that it's when you start to build those levels of constraints into your system that enable it to be effectively foolproof. And that's what you want to achieve. When you're scaling your business, when you're building it, when you're bringing on new people, when you're onboarding it, when you're selling it, you want the dumbest guy in the room to be able to understand what they need to do, because that's also how you're going to be able to reduce your operating costs and scale your business, if you can really simplify what needs to be done rather than paying, six figures for every employee that is going to absolutely burn through anything that you're trying to do. So I can't go through my presentation and sort of share. It would be a fast for me to try and explain our 5 layers of systemization and how we actually build our processes. But I'm going to give you some of the common mistakes that people make, and I think so. We have a 5-layer process. I'm actually happy to share it with you, and if there's like show notes or anything like that, you can sort of give it to people for the visual so they can understand a little bit. But in our 5 layers, the last 2 layers, so we go from core processes to process groups to sub-processes to activities and then working instructions. And that's levels 1 through 5. Now, where people typically make mistakes is they'll jump in, and let's continue with the Helium 10 example. So let's say they would open up a Word doc and they'd simply write, jump into Cerebro, dump a whole bunch of keywords in there, see what it churns out, and off we go. And that's how most people start it. They do what we call a bottom-up approach, whereas where you want to be is you want to be taking a top-down approach. So you want to be understanding operationally and organizationally what are the key drivers in the business at a high level, and then stepping down, who's involved, and I'll give you the example of listing creation, right? Which might, to the untrained ear, seem like the most simple thing that you can do on Amazon. I'll just create a listing and off we go. But when you start to think about all the factors that are involved, right? You have creative, you have listing, keyword research and optimization, which are going to be 2 different people in most cases. You've got inventory and demand planning to making sure that things actually land inside of Amazon at the right time. You've got to have, potentially a whole bunch of other team members that touch on it from, like I said, copywriting, from the design elements. So what you're doing effectively is you're siloing the specific tool inside of Helium 10, where really what you need to be doing is connecting all the dots between all the individuals that need to get involved so they understand where they come into play. And so that's why, and again, it's a little harder just with an audio podcast, but our level 3, which is what we call sub-processes, that's where you actually have each of the individuals and what each of the steps that they're taking that they do. And so you actually start to see visually, right, I'm going to need a designer, I'm going to need a keyword researcher, depending on how big you are, whether you're doing it all yourself. I'm going to need someone to optimize my listing. I'm going to need someone to buy my PPC as I start to get larger. And so it all comes down to taking that top-down approach and first understanding, well, what's actually happening in the business and how does that actually come together. Another key area, another key issue that people have is that there's no defined storage method. So how we like to build things and how I would really recommend, we're huge advocates of ClickUp as a project management software. It's really affordable and it lets you we build a company wiki. So inside of it is all the working instructions and activities on how to do everything, but you can also build all of the workflows. But what's most important, and if you guys see this presentation, I'm happy to give anyone who's listening the presentation as well, if you guys are sharing it outside of Sell and Scale. But ultimately, having the defined storage method. So we have a numbering and naming convention for every aspect. So, and I'll try and give you guys some tangible examples. So let's say you have 50 SKUs of products, and I'm working on one and Bradley's working on another, and there's 5 other people that are working on the different products, because that's how we've decided to throw our company together. Now it becomes very, very difficult to transition from my SKU to Bradley's SKU to anyone else's SKU unless every single one of the folders are structured in a way where it's specs and creative, and building that storage method from a filing perspective also transitions and is effective inside of a standard operating procedure and a systems building component. So a lot of people just sort of throw it all together and then come back and they can't find the files. And, it would be, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm not sitting here, being holier than thou. Like, if I was honest with myself, especially historically, on the number of hours that I've wasted in trying to find files or redoing Loom videos or whatever it looks like, it's embarrassing. So that's just a couple of the key examples. I can keep keep rolling if you want.
Give me step 1. Like, what's the, hey, I'm a 6-figure seller. I'm a 7-figure seller. I've never had systems in place. I've never even thought about this kind of thing. Where do I start? Is it, getting one of these softwares? I think at Helium 10, maybe I'm not familiar with the one that you mentioned, but the counterpart, we use something called Monday for our project, management and things like that. So like, is it getting a software like that, or is it the documentation? Like, hey, no, I just need to start documenting, systems and SOPs. What's step one, and then continue on, please, with what you were talking about.
Yeah, so ClickUp is exactly like Monday. It's just probably a quarter of the price and has one feature that we really love, and that's the internal wiki. Step one would obviously be getting the Escala Academy course, because we'll teach you how we build our process. But step two would really be, realistically, I'm having a laugh here. We do have a course that came out recently that helps you build all this stuff, but ultimately it's understanding at a high level, and we have some resources on our website even that'll help you. It's at a high level understanding what are the key drivers inside of your business at a high level. And I'll give you the example. So for a typical Amazon business, your business will break out into 4 or 5 key core processes. So you're going to have your product research and development function. You're going to have your customer support. You'll likely have supply chain, and then you'll have product launch and brand management. We actually like to split those 2 functions, and then that's about it, really. So you'd start to get a handle of what are the core drivers, and then inside of those core drivers, and I'm just going to read off a few here, but for us, inside of product research and development, it's product research and validation. So getting clarity on what are the products you're bringing to market. Product development and sourcing. So taking to that next step, package design, and then product sign off. So those would be sort of the 4 steps inside of it. So I'd say taking that top-down approach, what you really need to do, and what we would do in Escala, is we interview, shadow, and review everything that's happening operationally. So if you wanted to get clarity on your business, and again, Helium 10's a massive company today, I'm sure if I went and I asked you, Bradley, even about just how you produce your podcast, right? If I asked you and I asked 5 other people in the team, I guarantee you I'm going to get probably very close, but 5 different vantage points of what it actually looks like to produce it. So I'd say if I'm going to self-implement this and I didn't have all the background, I would be understanding and interviewing and starting to get clarity on what's everyone actually doing in the business operationally. And you don't need to go, like, if you're a large company, if you're a 8-figure seller, 9-figure seller at that point, you're not going to interview every single person in the business. You're going to interview sort of the key stakeholders at sort of middle management level, probably will be the lowest. But if you're a small business, interview them, understand what's happening in your business, and then you're going to start to document out what are the key drivers, and then what are the actual sub processes. So what is each individual actually doing, and what's the relationship between each of those in order to deliver the desired outcome?
I think structure of how you start setting up your team is important to get in the beginning. Now, I don't want to say that, hey, if you've already got 20 employees, you're screwed, but let's say in a perfect world, I'm just around at that level where I need to start hiring out. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm assuming that there's like maybe some characteristics of successful companies with the way they set up their team, or maybe some common characteristics that you've seen where you look at this company's structure and organization, you're like, wow, this is a well-oiled machine. Their operations that they have. What are some common characteristics that companies that are really working well with their organization? What are some characteristics that you can maybe mention?
Yeah, great, fantastic question. I wish more people would ask me that. So I would say Woo-hoo! When I'm looking,
that's what a podcast host likes to hear. There you go. Go ahead.
It's mate, you're slinging straight fire here, and I am eating it up, and I hope the audience is too. But I think when I look at the characteristics that work best for most businesses operationally, there's a few fundamentals that they get right. I'd say at any level, obviously once you're bigger than just you as an individual, even when you're at 2 people, and that might even be just having one 10-hour-a-week assistant, whatever it looks like. I think the most important thing is to have a business operating system. So there's loads of books on all of this. I'm a huge believer in Traction, EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. If you guys haven't read that, cannot recommend it enough. There's books like Scale Up and 2Y 3X. There's Michael Gerber's E-Myth Revisited. There's loads of books that cover these topics, and I think you guys are also figuring out I'm a bit of a bookworm for this stuff. But having an effective business operating system that helps build internal communication, I would say, is the number one fundamental, because nothing happens more quickly than when you and your co-founder have your heads down and you're building, and one's on product, one's on marketplace, one's focused on selling, one's producing, whatever the DNA of your business looks like, and you lose touch and you lose focus and you lose clarity. So having regular cadences of meetings that cover critical business topics is one. And I'd say as you start to scale, and when you think about the org strategy and structure that you're building, it's not just about, and again, everything I'm saying, guys, by the way, I've been guilty of making these mistakes. I'm the furthest thing from perfect, and it's all about progress, not perfection. But specifically, even to the interviewing component, we leverage a methodology called WHO, the A method for hiring. And one of the big things that we like to do is you define the role that's needed by the business as it's attached to the alignment of the success of the company or the function, and not just finding, your mate's wife's daughter's dog's best friend's mom, right? You really have to go in there with clear intent on how is this going to serve the company. And so building a clear job description, building a mission, what does success look like, the outcomes, so what does this individual need to deliver on, and then what are the attributes this person needs to have, and building a scorecard and interviewing them against a series of questions that fit with your business alignment. I mean, that's how I'd say that's when you're starting to get really serious with your business, and when you're really starting to put mechanisms in effect to see real success. Because as you're growing, you want to attract A players. You want to have the best people, and the best people understand what a real process looks like. So I'd say having a business operating process in place, and then also making sure that you're feeding the business on its needs, not on just people that you would like to have around. It's great when those things align, and I'm very fortunate I get to work with my co-founder, who's incredible, and Lippy, and I have an amazing team around me, and I'm very lucky to be in that environment. But I'd say as you start to think that way, it becomes a real paradigm shift in what you're able to achieve.
Okay, excellent info. Now, in the last couple of minutes here, towards the end of our each podcast episode, I do something called the TST 30-second tip, where we just go over some like hard-hitting strategies that you can say within 30 seconds or 1 minute. But let's kind of and I usually just let the guest just pick whatever the topic is. But I just want to kind of stick to this topic. And when we have you back in a year or so, we'll have you talk. We'll just shift the focus completely, not talk about SOPs or systems at all. But can we get like maybe 2 quick hitting strategies for somebody out there? Like obviously maybe in a perfect world, and I'll definitely allow people to to reach out to you. We'll give your contact info. In a perfect world, it's like, hey, let's go ahead and reach out to Escala and have you guys do everything for us. But maybe I'm not ready for that yet. What's a couple highly actionable, easy wins to at least get on the right path to have better systems in place if I'm an e-commerce entrepreneur out there?
The very first starting point I would suggest is clarity. Getting clarity on where your business sits right now. So understanding what's actually happening operationally and just starting to document it. So I know I was talking a lot about the bottom up versus top down and all these aspects where people get things wrong, but having some level of documentation and some understanding and some level of video is better than nothing. And so I'd also sort of piggyback onto the fact that it's about progress, not perfection, right? When we go and we do a project inside of Escala, a lot of people will say, don't worry about our current state, just build the future state. Just build how we should be operating. And our response is always the same, is that we need to understand the current state so that we can build you incrementally to the next level, because to go from a level 1 to a level 5 will absolutely break the business. And so that really translates to anyone, is that don't worry about having a Scala level SOPs. If you want to self-implement, I was serious. We do actually have a course that we released at Sell and Scale that's still heavily discounted, but that's still you applying it yourself. And so I'd say ultimately making sure that you understand what's happening in your business, and just starting to document it is going to set you up for success when you get to that point where you're starting to take things more seriously, or the business is growing to a level where you really need to start onboarding a whole lot more people.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Love it. Well, maybe one more quick hitter for us.
One more quick hitter. I would say one of the things that I sort of would leave you guys on is your goal is always to delegate accountability and responsibility, not tasks. And so, if anyone's ever heard me talk before, and I have a staffing company called Multiply Me, which is out of the Philippines.
You know what? I love that. That's like a perfect quote there. Can you repeat that? I don't know if that's your catchphrase, but if not, it should be your catchphrase. Repeat that for the masses out there again.
Yeah. So it's delegate accountability, not tasks. So you're always going to be the bottleneck when you're picking up a VA and you have to tell them verbatim, step by step, what they're delivering on. You don't really free yourself up, and that's sort of the biggest misconception. Is when you delegate accountability, when you give someone ownership and you say, your point is to succeed in this role. And a really simple example might look like bring one new product to market this quarter. Really, really simple. Don't say, follow these 47 steps, and at the end of it, come and I'll check it off. And once they've done that, well, you have to be the origin story or the origination piece of what they need to do next. You're never really going to scale your business that way. So delegate accountabilities and responsibilities, not tasks.
Love that. Now, if people want to get more information from you, or perhaps get some help on this topic, how can they find you on the interwebs out there?
So I'm most active on LinkedIn, Yoni Kosminski. You can find me there. I'm Yon Kos on Instagram. It goes in and out. But yeah, you can also, if you've come all the way here, feel free to email me at Yoni@WeAreAscala, or any of the other websites and businesses that I'm involved. It's just Yoni at.
All right. Well, I hope that I don't have to wait until next Sell and Scale Summit to see you. But if I'm at a conference where you're speaking, I promise next time not to miss yours, so I can get all this good stuff in person.